One rock changed everything engineers believed to be possible. This wasn't speculation or hearsay. It was a measured block uncovered in 2014 by a team from the Lebanese University and the German Archaeological Institute. Professor Jeanine Abdul Massih led the work in Area 3 of the old quarry. The team recorded a block nearly 20 metres long, 6 metres wide, and at least 5.5 metres tall. The calculated volume came to about 669.5 cubic metres. It is heavier than 2 fully loaded jumbo jets and beats the famous stone of the pregnant woman and the Trilithon by hundreds of tons. The German Institute called it the biggest quarried stone known from ancient times. That sentence alone reset the conversation about how ancient builders worked. So how could ancient builders move something this massive without modern technology? And if they could handle one block this size, what else were they capable of back then? It started quietly that summer in 2014. A team from the Lebanese University and the German Archaeological Institute had been working in the Baalbek quarry for years, trying to understand how the old builders carved and planned to move one of the biggest stones already known, the one locals called the Stone of the Pregnant Woman. Nobody expected to find anything new. The whole point was to check how that famous block was still stuck in the ground and why it was turned the wrong way from the Temple of Jupiter. The workers began by clearing the soil and loose rock around its edges. They dug along the northern and eastern sides, brushing away dust that had been sitting there for centuries. At first, it looked like any regular cleaning job, but as they went deeper, they noticed a flat, smooth surface running under the layer of debris. The more they cleared, the more they realised this wasn't the bottom of the old stone at all. It was another block, one no one had ever seen before. It sat buried in a lower layer of limestone that looked stronger and smoother than the one above it. The faces of the block were already shaped and neat, which meant the ancient builders had been in the middle of cutting it free before something stopped the work. The team named it the Forgotten Stone. It looked like a massive ship still trapped in dry dock, waiting for its launch. Once they cleared enough of it to see its true shape, they brought out their measuring tools. They measured it at about 19.6 metres long, 6.1 metres wide, and at least 5.6 metres tall. The lower part was still stuck under the rock, so that last number was only the minimum. When they did the math, the block came out to about 670 cubic metres. Since limestone usually weighs around 2.5 tonnes per cubic metre, that puts the whole thing at roughly 1,650 tonnes. This was heavier than anything ever quarried in the ancient world. When the figure was checked and confirmed, the German team released a statement that they had just uncovered the largest stone block ever cut by human hands. Even next to the massive stone of the pregnant woman, which weighs about 1,000 tonnes, this new find made everything else look small. And as the news spread, one thought echoed among everyone on site. How on earth did people 2,000 years ago plan to move something that even modern machines can barely lift? Before the fences went up and researchers took over, the people of Baalbek already had their own ideas about the stones. For as long as anyone could remember, the villagers told stories that passed from one family to another. Some believed it was Cain, the son of Adam, who built it long ago when the world was still new, filling it with giants who had the strength to lift stones that size. Older residents would shake their heads when asked how humans could have done it and say, only the giants or the spirits could. Drivers who passed by the quarry often told visitors that the stones had powers. Many said that if a woman who couldn't have children touched the big stone, the stone of the pregnant woman, she would become a mother. People treated that block like something holy. Women came from nearby towns, placing their hands on its surface in silence, hoping it would bring them luck. It became part of local life, something between faith and folklore, and everyone knew someone who swore it worked. When guards and workers started noticing new excavation activity near the site, rumours began spreading fast. Word travelled through cafes, markets and mosques that something strange was happening underground. Some said the archaeologists had uncovered a stone bigger than anything ever seen before. Others whispered that the team had found proof that ancient builders weren't human at all. There was talk of a hidden curse, and even stories that the new stone might be one of Solomon's blocks, carved with the help of jinn. A few drivers who gave tours to visitors said they had worked around the site for years, without realizing how many giant stones were buried there. One man named Dory had given tours several times but admitted he never knew about the huge Trilithon blocks under the temple. That kind of confusion was common. Even locals who lived right next to the ruins didn't fully understand how deep the structures went. People kept trying to make sense of it in their own way. Some believed the Romans built everything and that the mystery was just human genius. Others thought there had to be an older civilization with lost tools and knowledge. Nobody agreed on the details, but everyone landed on the same point. Whatever those ancient workers pulled off in Baalbek, it went way beyond anything people can clearly explain. Since we already know the basic figures, the next step is seeing how they were nailed down. Once the dust cleared from the first round of digging, the survey team stepped in to collect the hard data. The group included researchers from the Lebanese University and the German Archaeological Institute, working together under Professor Jeanine Abdul Massih. Their job was simple on paper, but enormous in reality. They had to measure, record, and verify every inch of the newly exposed block in Area 3 of the quarry. Workers brought out their tools, notebooks, and cameras, while a few technicians set up laser devices to get exact readings. The first numbers they wrote down already looked unreal. The stone stretched 19.6 meters long and about 6.1 meters wide. Its height, based on what was visible, came in at 5.6 meters, around 18 feet. In the official notes, the team underlined that the real height was probably greater, since the lower section was still buried in the ground. They stopped the depth check early, because the terrain was too unstable to continue safely, and they planned to finish that part the following year. The logbooks also included details about the stone's surface and the surrounding rock. The faces of the block were flat and even, showing that the ancient workers had already done careful trimming, probably preparing it for lifting and transport. A single carved line ran along the top, marking where the cutting process had ended. To anyone studying it, that line looked like the point where work had suddenly stopped centuries ago. After the measurements came the calculations. Using the recorded numbers, the team found the total volume to be about 669.5 cubic meters. To figure out the weight, they applied the known density of the local limestone, which is about 2.5 tons for every cubic meter. The math gave them a result of around 1,673 tons. When that figure appeared in the log, everyone knew it was extraordinary. It meant the block was not only larger than the famous stone of the pregnant woman at 992 tons, but also far heavier than the nearby Area 4 stone, which had weighed roughly 1,100 tons. The geological notes added another key observation. The new monolith was still fully attached to the bedrock, resting at a tilt of about 15.5 degrees, the same natural angle found in the surrounding formation. That detail proved the quarrying followed the natural slope of the rock layer, instead of cutting straight through it, which explained how the workers managed to shape such enormous pieces with precision. Once the figures were checked, double-checked and confirmed, the results were sent to the German Archaeological Institute for review. The final report stated that the newly found block was the largest known stone ever cut in ancient times. When that statement went public, even veteran archaeologists were taken aback. The data was simple but undeniable. A single stone lying half buried in the Baalbek quarry weighed more than 2 fully loaded passenger planes combined. The numbers alone forced experts to rethink what ancient builders were capable of and how far human strength and simple tools could have really gone. After the survey work wrapped up, a few engineers on site started asking a simple question. If the ancient builders really planned to move that massive stone, could we even do it today? So they ran a few tests using modern cranes and rigging setups to see what would happen. The results surprised everyone. The first thing they realised was that even the biggest heavy lift cranes, the kind used in shipyards, max out at around 1,200 tons. The block in Baalbek was closer to 1,650 tons, which already put it beyond the safe limit of most modern machines. A few engineers tried running the math to see if it could be done using multiple cranes together, but even on paper, the stress on the cables, joints and support points was too much. To get a sense of scale, one of the engineers compared it to something modern that had actually been moved. He mentioned the levitated mass stone in Los Angeles, which weighed about 340 tons, roughly 1/3 the weight of just one of the smaller Baalbek blocks. That project took over a year to plan. It used an 80-metre trailer with 196 wheels and 44 axles, and it crawled 170 kilometres at 6.5 kilometres per hour. It was seen as one of the biggest moving operations in modern history, yet it only dealt with a fraction of Baalbek's size. To move something weighing over 1,600 tons safely, they would need custom machinery, specially built anchors, and weeks of controlled lifting. The standard cranes just weren't made for it. Some of the engineers later admitted that, even with all our modern tools, we would need enormous power just to shift the block a few inches. It was one thing to talk about it in theory, but standing in front of the stone, knowing the ancient builders shaped it without engines, steel, or hydraulics, was a different experience. Once word got out that a stone bigger than anything ever found had been uncovered in Baalbek, it didn't take long for the news to explode online. When the story reached larger outlets like Smithsonian Magazine and Gizmodo, it turned into a worldwide headline. Reporters repeated the numbers over and over. Articles called it the Forgotten Stone and the biggest boulder known from antiquity. The tone in most reports was the same mix of amazement and confusion. Everyone agreed on the math, but nobody could explain how ancient workers had planned to move it. In interviews, members of the German team offered practical answers. Margaret Van Ness explained that the ancient builders likely planned to drag the stone along a slope using wooden rollers or capstans, but that the block probably turned out to be too heavy, which was why it never left the quarry. That made sense on paper, but most readers weren't convinced. If it really weighed 1,650 tons, even modern machines would struggle. As the story spread, more questions popped up than answers. Online forums filled with debates. Some people thought it proved that earlier civilizations had advanced technology we'd lost. Others said it was just clever, ancient engineering pushed to its limit. A few even claimed the site had connections to extraterrestrial builders. The archaeologists stuck to their data, but the public focused on the mystery. But that's only the start, because some researchers take the mystery even further. Some researchers believe the stones at Baalbek were not built by the Romans at all, but by an older, more advanced civilization that existed long before recorded history. They say the site is far older than the temples we see today, pointing to signs of human activity dating back 9 or even 11,000 years. Beneath the Roman ruins, archaeologists have found layers that seem to belong to a much earlier time, and that makes some people wonder if the Romans only built on top of something that was already there. Old field notes from earlier excavations describe the lowest foundation stones as too massive and too precise to fit normal Roman methods. These stones form the base of what's now called the Temple of Jupiter, and they weigh between 750 and 900 tons each. The joints between them are so tight that even a thin blade cannot slide in. To those who support the advanced civilization theory, that kind of accuracy feels impossible without modern tools. Some say that whoever built it must have known techniques we no longer understand. The story became even stranger when the Forgotten Stone was discovered. The stone was already shaped and ready to be moved, but it looks like work stopped suddenly, as if something happened that forced the builders to abandon it. People who believe in this lost civilization point to that unfinished state as a clue. They say the builders may have vanished during a great disaster, maybe even the flood stories mentioned in ancient myths. According to this idea, the survivors scattered and their knowledge disappeared, leaving behind these giant stones as the only proof they ever existed. Supporters of the theory also focus on the strange perfection of the work. Some think the builders used advanced technology, maybe something that could change gravity or use sound to move heavy objects. Others even claim the platform at Baalbek may have served a purpose beyond architecture, perhaps acting as a kind of stabilizer or even a launch base of some kind. After the theories about an ancient advanced civilization, came another idea that went even further. Some people began saying the builders of Baalbek weren't human at all. According to them, the huge stone platform at the base of the Temple of Jupiter wasn't meant for any normal building. They say it was made as a kind of landing pad, a solid base for visitors from beyond Earth. This version of the story became tied to the old ancient astronaut theory, which claims that beings from other planets helped shape early human history. Supporters point to the Trilithon stones, each weighing between 800 and 1,200 tons, and say no ancient tool or method could have placed them so perfectly to them. the simplest answer is that the builders had advanced technology, machines, or knowledge that could handle such massive weight with ease. Writers like Zechariah Sitchin helped spread the idea that Baalbek might have been a spaceport for the Anunnaki, gods or travelers described in Mesopotamian stories. He believed ancient texts, such as the Epic of Gilgamesh, hinted that rockets or flying crafts once descended and lifted off from the site. Some of his followers went even further, claiming that if you trace a line from the northeast edge of the Great Pyramid in Egypt, it connects directly to a geometric pattern in Baalbek, suggesting both sites were part of one global system built by the same beings. According to this theory, the platform's size and precision weren't just for show, they were necessary to handle the landing or takeoff of enormous craft. People who support the idea say the stones form a kind of hexagon that makes more sense when seen from above. They often refer to an old aerial photograph that keeps surfacing online. The picture, taken from high altitude, shows the temple grounds with strange geometric symmetry, which some claim proves it was designed for aerial use. One Russian professor named Agrest once said the structure was the remains of a giant airfield, a claim later echoed by Erich von Däniken and others. They all agreed that only someone with knowledge of physics far beyond our own could have lifted stones weighing over 1,600 tons from the quarry and placed them with perfect accuracy. Some people believe the builders of Baalbek knew a kind of science that has been lost to us. They think the ancient workers found a way to change the weight of the stones themselves, making them lighter or easier to move by using vibration or sound. The idea is that the people who built the site understood something about physics that we no longer do, something that let them control how matter behaves. Supporters of this idea point out that the blocks in the foundation are far heavier than what modern cranes can safely lift. The Trilithon stones each weigh close to that upper limit, making ropes, pulleys, or rollers unrealistic. So they argue there had to be another method. Some researchers call it acoustic levitation, where sound waves or resonance could make heavy things behave as if they were much lighter. They connect it to ancient myths that talk about moving stones with music or voice, like the story of Merlin singing the stones of Stonehenge into place. People who look at the stone surfaces often point to unusual marks and clean cuts, as proof that something more than hammers or chisels was used. The grooves on the sides of the blocks are long, smooth and evenly spaced. Archaeologists usually explain them as traces from toothed chisels or picks, but others think they look too precise. Some say the cuts remind them of modern tools like drills, saws or machines that use heat to slice through rock. There are also reports of small metallic traces around the quarry that do not match the local geology. While some experts say these came from later use of iron tools, others claim they could be remnants of an energy-based tool or ancient machinery. According to these alternative thinkers, if the builders used vibration or anti-gravity to move the stones, there would be no need for roads, rollers, or cranes, which explains why none have ever been found. Researchers think the builders of Baalbek didn't make the stones huge just to show off their skill. They believe the size itself was a sacred act, part of how people back then connected with their gods. The site was first a Phoenician temple for Baal, the god of storms and fertility. People believed this was where Baal came down to earth, so everything built there had to match the power of the god they worshipped. When the Romans took over, they kept the same sacred idea but changed the names. They called the place Heliopolis, which means city of the sun, and dedicated it to Jupiter, Venus and Mercury. For them too, it became a home for the gods, not just a temple for people. The massive Trilithon stones, each weighing close to 800 tons, were part of the base of the Temple of Jupiter. The scale was no accident. The bigger the stones, the closer the builders felt they could reach the gods. Visitors who came to pray or celebrate festivals were meant to stand in awe, feeling small beside something that seemed almost beyond human ability. It was a way of saying that the gods were not only present, but powerful enough to shape the earth itself. But the size wasn't just about faith, it also sent a message of power to anyone who saw it. Back then, religion and rule often went together. The emperors and leaders who funded the temple wanted people to see that their power came from divine favour. The Temple of Jupiter became a symbol that tied the god's strength to the empire's strength. The tall columns, about 65 feet high, and the giant platform made sure no one could forget that connection. To stand there was to believe that only gods or those blessed by them could make something that grand. Even the way the stones were arranged had meaning. Archaeologists have noticed that the higher the rows go, the larger the stones become. Some say this was planned to draw the eyes upward, as if guiding people's thoughts to heaven. It gave a sense that the gods themselves had built it. Local stories add another layer to the mystery. Old legends say the temple wasn't built by ordinary people at all. Some claim it was made by the Nephilim, a race of giants said to be part divine. Others say it was built by Cain, after he was exiled for killing Abel. Each version turns the site into something more than just a temple. It becomes a mark left by beings who are closer to heaven than we are now. Rumours about Baalbek take a different turn when people suggest the stones might not be ancient at all. The story claims they could belong to a modern experiment carried out by big construction companies or even government engineers working in secret. It sounds unusual, but the details give it weight. The largest block found in the quarry weighs about 1,650 tons, far beyond what most modern cranes can lift. To those who believe it, this isn't just a coincidence. They see the site as a quiet testing ground where new lifting systems or heavy transport methods were tried under private contracts that never reached the public. What keeps this idea alive is how well it fits into the gaps that still puzzle historians. The Romans are credited with building the Temple of Jupiter, yet no written record explains how they moved the 3 800-ton stones under its base. Since the Romans documented their projects carefully, the silence feels strange. People who favour the modern test theory think that missing paperwork might not be from ancient times at all. They talk about erased files, missing footage, or undisclosed deals suggesting that work was done at the site within the last few decades, disguised as archaeology or preservation. Some even mention whistleblower notes hinting that military contractors used the area to test new lifting technologies without public attention. When they uncovered the forgotten stone, the claim argued that it had been placed there recently, not left by ancient builders, and that the dig was part of a staged discovery meant to test or showcase a new construction record. The theory survives because the edges look too neat for hand tools, and the site lacks any sign of the roads, scaffolds, or ramps that ancient workers would have needed. To believers, the absence feels intentional, as if the work was modern and the tools were quietly removed once the job was done. Coming right after the talk about Baalbek possibly being a modern test site, it feels natural to look at a few other places that raise similar questions. I keep wondering if there's a pattern, or if each case stands on its own. Some of them sound mysterious at first, but when you look closer, the picture gets more balanced. In southern Egypt, near Aswan, there's the unfinished obelisk. It's one of the clearest examples of a massive ancient project left midway. Archaeologists from the Supreme Council of Antiquities have studied it for years, and researchers like Mark Lehner and Dieter Arnold often use it as proof of how far ancient quarrying could go without modern tools. The obelisk would have been about 42 meters long and weighed around 1,200 tons if it had been finished. It cracked while workers were carving it directly out of the bedrock, so they stopped. You can still see the chisel marks, the tool grooves, and even the narrow trenches they used to separate it from the rock. Nothing about it looks modern. It's physical proof that people thousands of years ago were already working on a similar scale to what we now call impossible. Then there's something completely different off the coast of Japan. Near Yonaguni Island, divers found huge stone steps and terraces lying underwater. They were first spotted by a local diver named Kihachiro Aratake. In the mid-1980s, marine geologist Masaki Kimura studied them and said the shapes looked too organized to be natural. He thought they were the remains of a lost city, built more than 10,000 years ago, before sea levels rose. But other scientists, like geologist Robert Schoch from Boston University, visited the site and came to another conclusion. He said the sandstone there breaks along straight lines by itself, and waves and earthquakes can shape it into flat platforms and right angles. To him, it's a geological formation that just happens to look man-made. When you compare these two sites, you see how the same kind of mystery can lead to opposite answers. The unfinished obelisk has tool marks and records that match ancient workers' Yonaguni, has straight lines and steps, but no signs of tools or culture nearby to explain who built it. Both still make people argue. Some see proof of lost skill. Others see nature doing what it does over time. That's why Baalbek sits somewhere between them in people's minds. It has real stones like Aswan, but puzzles that feel more like Yonaguni. And maybe that's what keeps it interesting. Each site reminds us that what looks strange at first might have many explanations, depending on who's looking and what they're hoping to find. After all the talk about lost technologies and hidden projects, experts from different fields try to look at Baalbek with straightforward tools and hard data. Geologists, archaeologists and engineers work together to see what could actually be proven. When they tested samples from the massive stones and compared them with rocks from the nearby quarry, they found the same composition. The limestone matched perfectly, which means the builders most likely used stone from right there in the hills above the site. That finding came from studies led by the German Archaeological Institute, along with Lebanon's Directorate General of Antiquities. It's one of those details that gets overlooked, but it's solid evidence that the material is local and not part of any modern installation. Archaeologists then look closely at the marks left on the stones. Under the sunlight, you can see rows of grooves and rough parallel lines carved into the surfaces. They also noticed the block sizes increase by layer, something that made the podium look even grander, but also served to keep it stable. A stone expert pointed out that the podium was later covered in plaster and paint, which would have hidden those joints completely. To him, that means the purpose was more structural than decorative. In other words, these stones weren't magic. They were built with a clear engineering plan. Engineers who joined the research compared Roman lifting tools and construction methods with what would have been needed to move the Baalbek stones. They used data from writings by Vitruvius, the Roman architect, who described cranes, pulleys and winches that multiplied force using simple physics. In modern tests, engineers built scaled-down versions of those devices and managed to move massive blocks using nothing more than wooden rollers, ropes and manpower. It was slow, but it worked. Another thing they studied was how the structure handled the constant earthquakes that hit the region. Geologists found that using large, well-fitted stones made the foundation flexible enough to survive tremors for centuries. That practical reason helps explain the unusual size without bringing in lost science. When you combine the geological match, the visible tool marks, the Roman records of construction, and the engineering tests, everything fits into a timeline that makes sense. The evidence shows a project that grew during Roman expansion, where scale was a symbol of power and faith. It wasn't aliens or modern technology, just people using clever methods, teamwork, and an understanding of weight and balance that was far ahead of its time. When everything is sorted, some parts of Baalbek are clear, and some aren't. What's real is that the stones are there, carved and fitted with impossible precision. The biggest one weighs about 1,650 tons, confirmed by the German Archaeological Institute in 2014. The Romans built their temples on top, and that's the part historians agree on. What's myth are the stories about aliens, lost powers, or secret tools. No proof of any of that has ever been found. Most of those tales came from old translation mistakes and wild guesses. But the mystery that remains is how they did it. No modern test has fully explained how ancient builders moved and placed stones that massive. Whoever built it knew something about strength and precision that still puzzles even today.